All right, let's get right into it. We often hear that truth is stranger than fiction, and today we are going to prove it. We're cracking open some officially declassified government files to look at secret operations that are so wild you'd swear they were just crazy conspiracy theories. The catch? They turned out to be 100% real. You know how we all love a good conspiracy theory, right? It's fun to speculate. But what happens when the black ink is removed, the documents are released, and the wildest stories actually turn out to be stone-cold fact? Well, we're about to find out. We're going to explore 4 real-life covert ops that sound like they were ripped straight from a Hollywood spy movie script.
So first up, we're heading overseas. We're opening 2 case files where the whole point was to mess with foreign governments. But, as you're about to see, even the most detailed super-secret plans can go wrong in the most spectacular ways imaginable.
Okay, so picture this. It's the late 90s. The Cold War's over. But there's a new kind of tension in the air. The CIA gets this feeling, and really, it's just a hunch at this point, that Iran might be trying to build nuclear weapons. And that fear, the fear of a new country getting the bomb, was enough for them to cook up a plan that was, well, let's just say it was a little too clever for its own good. So what was this genius plan? It was called Operation Merlin, and on paper, it sounds brilliant. Step 1. Get your hands on a real blueprint for part of a nuclear warhead. Step 2. Secretly add a few critical but very subtle mistakes. Step 3. Find a Russian scientist who's defected and have him leak these flawed plans to the Iranians. The goal? Iran wastes years and millions of dollars building something that would never, ever work. Simple, right?
Yeah, about that. There was just one tiny, little, insignificant detail the CIA completely forgot about. And that one detail, it didn't just mess up the plan, it blew the whole thing up in their faces.
And here is where it all goes wrong. See, the CIA never bothered to tell the Russian scientists that the blueprints were fake. So what does he do? Being a good, careful scientist, he looks them over, spots the errors the CIA planted, and he corrects them. He thought he was being helpful. So he then proudly hands over a perfectly working, fully corrected set of nuclear blueprints to Iran. The CIA might have actually helped the very program they were trying to stop. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up.
Okay, so from that masterpiece of an operation, let's get a little closer to home. We're in the early 1960s. Fidel Castro's revolution has succeeded, and now there's a communist country, an ally of the Soviet Union, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. For the U.S. government, this was a massive red flag, and tensions were already through the roof. The Pentagon was itching for a reason to go to war and invade Cuba, but they had a problem. They didn't really have a good one. So they decided, hey, what if we just create one ourselves? And this is the twisted logic behind Operation Northwoods. The whole idea was to stage a bunch of violent, horrifying attacks and then point the finger directly at Castro. Now, I need you to understand something. What you're reading on this slide, that's not my summary. That is a direct quote from the declassified government proposal. It is absolutely chilling. The plan included staging terror attacks in American cities, sinking boats of refugees, and this, faking an attack on a civilian plane full of American college kids. The plan was to swap the real plane with a drone and then blow it out of the sky on live radio. And you might think, okay, this was probably just some rogue general with a crazy idea. Nope. This plan was formally written up and signed by every single member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officers in the country. They presented it to the Secretary of Defense, who took it straight to President Kennedy. And thankfully, JFK was appalled. He rejected it completely, and the idea was buried, until the documents were declassified decades later. All right, so we've seen how far the government was willing to go to interfere in other countries. It's pretty shocking stuff. But what happens when that kind of thinking, that level of deception, gets turned inward? What happens when the target is its own citizens? Well, these next case files reveal a secret war for the hearts and minds of the American public.
You have to remember, the Cold War wasn't just fought with spies and armies. It was a war of propaganda, a war of ideas. The U.S. government was absolutely terrified of communist ideology gaining a foothold at home. So, they came up with a solution. A secret program to make absolutely sure Americans were thinking the right thoughts and hearing the right message, whether that message was true or not.
And this program was called Operation Mockingbird. The CIA's plan was simple. If you want to control what people think, you have to control what they see and hear. So they went straight to the source, secretly recruiting hundreds of journalists from the biggest and most respected media companies in the country. Just look at this list. From newspapers to movies, they had every angle covered.
So these journalists were essentially moonlighting for the CIA. They would feed the agency intel, but more importantly, they would publish stories that were written by the CIA. Propaganda disguised as real news was being printed in papers and broadcast over the radio. It was, for all practical purposes, America's first state-sponsored fake news factory, all designed to shape how the public viewed the world. So how did a secret like this ever get out? Well, by the 1970s, after Vietnam and Watergate, public trust in the government was at rock bottom. The Senate created a special investigation called the Church Committee, and their whole job was to dig into what the intelligence agencies were really doing. Their final report in 1976 was explosive. It blew the lid off Mockingbird and a ton of other programs, and the American public was stunned. For our final case file, we're going to rewind the clock all the way back to the end of World War II. Germany is in ruins, but they had, by far, the most advanced rocket technology in the world, and the U.S. knew the brilliant and morally corrupt scientists behind that tech were suddenly available. A frantic, secret race began. Grab the Nazi scientists before the Soviets could.
This was Operation Paperclip, and this slide really gets to the dark, moral compromise at the heart of it all. The U.S. government secretly brought over German scientists, many of whom weren't just party members, but were directly involved in horrible war crimes. I mean, just look at this. You have a man who was complicit in deadly human experiments in a concentration camp. And then, a few years later, he's a celebrated director at NASA, called the father of space medicine.
And he wasn't just a one-off. This wasn't a few bad apples. The sheer scale of Operation Paperclip is staggering. We are talking about over 1,600 German scientists and their families who were secretly moved to the U.S. Their files were scrubbed, their pasts were sanitized, and they were given new lives.
And here's the tough part. You can't deny their impact. Men like Wernher von Braun, who used slave labor to build rockets for Hitler, became the lead architect of the Saturn V rocket that put Americans on the moon. So yeah, Operation Paperclip was a huge success for American science. But that success was built by deliberately whitewashing the horrific histories of men who had committed unforgivable crimes.
So there you have it. From plotting fake terror attacks, to running a secret propaganda network, to hiring actual war criminals, these declassified files paint a pretty shocking picture. And it really forces you to ask the question, if this is the stuff they've admitted to doing decades ago, what else is still sitting in those classified vaults, just waiting to see the light of day?